Philip Meyer, welcome to the pod, mate. Really good to have an opportunity to chat with you.
Good to chat with you. Thank you for the opportunity, Daniel.
Now, for everybody watching and listening who may not know who you are, I know there's a lot of people tuning in that are from the Microsoft partner ecosystem as well. But for everybody that is watching and listening that doesn't know who you are, give us a little bit of an idea who Phil is, your background, and what it is now that's keeping you busy.
Oh, okay. There's a lot in that, and I'll try and make it short. So I'm Phil Meyer. I've been with Microsoft some 33 and a bit years, 44 years in the IT industry. In my current role, I'm what's called a technology strategist. So it's kind of, when people ask me to provide a bio, I usually say, I'm the guy you can ask anything of Microsoft. So it could be anything from Azure to modern work through security. Maybe not ask me about Xbox. I'm not a specialist on Xbox. I'm not a gamer. My time at Microsoft has had many different roles. I did study computer science, programming languages in particular, system design. When I joined Microsoft, they brought me in as a product manager, which is very bizarre. I had done some product development in my prior employee, and they saw me as somebody who might be able to explain things like LAN Manager and OS2 and programming languages like Visual Basic. But over that time, I've done conversations around Internet Explorer, had a group of developers working with me, and in more recent times, that journey has progressed to working with MSPs, particularly around our SPLA program, and more recently in and around everything AI and Azure.
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously this whole Gen AI and in our case, Copilot is taking off and is very, very hot at the moment. Now it's really more than just being a nice to have. It's starting to become, a really big part of a lot of organizations. Now, I've heard you talk and some of the content that you do present, whether it's online or at conferences as well, is around the time to reach the impact that the Gen AI, whether it is Copilot or ChatGPT, but the speed at which this type of technology has reached, let's just say 100 million users, as opposed to things like the internet and Facebook and things like that. So, what are you seeing in terms of whether it is Copilot or just Gen AI in general, the speed at which people are sort of adopting this sort of technology?
Rapid, as you pointed out, 100 million users in 3 months from November 2022. So by that early time frame, February, March of 2023, there was 100 million users, and it continues to grow. Look, I will make a comment. I'm really pleased that you're using the framing of Gen AI rather than just AI. As you know, AI has been around for a very, very long time. We can date it back to Alan Turing, who talked about it in computer science designs in the 40s. But then even in the 50s, there was some initial AI development work. Even before Gen AI, that November 2022, there's some amazing work done by Ian Goodfellow around using a thing called generative adversary networks, where two computers were fighting with one another in and around presenting images that they'd created and arguing whether they were real or not. So it has been a long time, but I think that November 2022, that release of ChatGPT was very much a defining moment, because suddenly we could go to a browser and ask questions and have a conversation with our computer with what seemed, and I'm being very specific in the word, seemed to be like a human at the other end. And it became conversational rather than just a search. Look, and I would say that, if I may, and I can talk with marbles in my mouth underwater, so do cut me off if you think I'm rambling, Dan. I have really seen a change in the last 6 months, if I may, in the conversations with people around generative AI. One, there's starting to be a realization that ChatGPT is wonderful for doing holiday planning, but maybe not in a work context. And even in a conversation earlier this morning with an MSP, where they were using it for doing business planning and proposal creating, there was a genuine concern that I shared back. Well, your competitor would have access to that if you're using the consumer version of ChatGPT. So there's an awareness starting to emerge about needing to be in a business context. And I thank you for referencing Copilot, which is a business context. I'm also, if I may, noticing that people are seeking to include generative AI capabilities beyond just creating PowerPoint presentations and agendas. They're now seeking to integrate that, to connect that into, if you will, system of record platforms, sales systems, ticketing systems, service systems, customer service systems, etc., so that they can have those generative queries accessing those systems of records, those databases, if you will, in their business. So a long answer, and I think we're still at the early stages. I think the opportunities in and around generative AI to immerse and increase productivity, quality of work, and even creativity are there. But I will emphasize again, you are talking to a machine. It's not a human being, and it's not controlling the world. So there is a level of safety I'm comfortable with, but we still need to be responsible in its usage.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you touched on a few good points there. I mean, we all see the generic sort of meeting summarizations and picking out the key points in certain bits of content and that type of thing. But I think with that integration with other line of business applications as well, and almost becoming like an agent type of capability is going to be, really where people see a lot of value. Now, ChatGPT, you spoke about that a little bit there. It's probably, started out really as more consumer type of stuff, but a lot of businesses then obviously started to use it. And I've heard a few stories where, companies or organizations have, copied and pasted lots of content into ChatGPT, and it, makes that almost publicly available. So in the work context, how have you seen the rise or the adoption of AI in the work context specifically, and how does Copilot help remediate that type of situation?
Yeah, so to give some numbers that we got from the recent Work Trends Index reports, if your listeners are interested, it's an easy link to get to, just aka.ms/WTI24, and you can have a look at that research. Now, that research is showing that about 76% of staff inside business now today, so more than the knowledge worker business, are using some sort of generative AI technology to help them do their work. And notably in Australia and New Zealand, that number's hit 84%. So there's a propensity for Australian and New Zealanders to really adopt this technology quite more rapidly than the rest of the world. Now, you did ask about some of the implications, and I'm sure that many who are listening now will have heard of the Samsung story, where a programmer took code and put that into ChatGPT, and then a couple of weeks later, a hacker was able to identify code fragments and attack those devices with those code segments. Or the more profound one, I was at a legal event only last night, and it was cited by a lawyer, the sad fact that some lawyers will use ChatGPT to seek out precedent for particular matters. And most notable is that case not so long ago, where a chap went to court based on a precedent that he thought he'd found on ChatGPT, and the case was completely dismissed because it had hallucinated, it had made it up. Domestically, I've come across some very sad stories of Australian companies where they've sought to get simplification of product designs, that they have very confidential product designs, and that information is leaked out through ChatGPT because it's trained on that data. It retains the information that you've given it, and sadly, in this particular case, the individual is making a very high security drone technology. Department of Defence, with their surveillance systems, picked that up, and that poor chap was no longer able to provide that drone to the Department of Defence. So, we're not a great manufacturing nation in Australia, and to see such a specialised piece, beautiful piece of technology having been withdrawn through a simple accident of a staff member thinking, it's okay to put in ChatGPT, I'll take that detailed spec, put it in, and off we go.
So how does... I guess if we turn our attention to Copilot, how is Microsoft alleviating that problem? So with Copilot itself, Things like is Copilot being? I get this question all the time. Is Copilot being trained on our data? What's it doing with from a security point of view? That is, I'll say, better than in a work context as opposed to getting that into ChatGPT.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there's actually a really nice article. So if somebody used Copilot or even ChatGPT and asked for the difference between ChatGPT and Copilot, you will find that they use the same base engine. They still use that GPT-4o, which is the current engine, to do the processing and analysis and the semantic index search, etc.
Yes.
Big difference is that, and I'm going to specifically call out ChatGPT Consumer, which is the one we all use for free, is very different to the Copilot, which is, there's a free version if you've got Microsoft 365 subscription. The big difference is it doesn't learn from your content. It's not learning, it's not developing based on your information. And the information that you are putting to it stays within your tenant. It's not leaking out, and any responses that are generated are not being shared with the world. They're staying inside your tenant. So I think that big difference is the training. It's not learning from your information. And second, with Copilot, your data stays inside your tenancy, inside your SharePoint, inside your Teams, inside Exchange, inside OneDrive, and it doesn't become available to the rest of the world. So that's the fundamental difference, those 2 points.
And I think they're two really key points that need to be brought, especially at the executive level, pretty soon in the conversation as well. What about there's a lot of the Copilot ecosystem. There is a lot of Copilots. Now, we'll go through a few of them in a minute, but what's the difference? Again, we go to copilot.microsoft.com. We've got a work tab. We've got a web toggle. What's the difference?
Yeah, great. So this goes to the point that when we hit the web button, and I must make it clear that to get those two buttons, you need to have something like an Entra account, right? Which is old school Azure Active Directory account. Where do I get those? I get them when I subscribe to Microsoft 365 as a business subscriber to that service. Or when I'm using Azure, I also get an Entra ID. So great, fantastic, got that. You may not find those if you go into Google Chrome, but if you go into Safari, you will. So what's the difference between a Google Chrome, a Safari, and an Edge? Well, there's been some great advertising by Apple recently talking about the Safari browser being secure. The Edge browser is secure. Now, the Google browser is a great browser, really good for consumer work, but from a work context, you will find that work button won't show up because we restrict, again, the premise of the whole Copilots is that your data is your data. Yeah. So let's step past that and go, okay, I've got a web button and I've got a work button. When I go to web, I can now ask questions which are actually going to the web. So all those efforts that you put into search engine optimization and your advertising, etc., still work. But what it's now doing is making sure that what it finds out there is using a semantic index rather than a keyword index.
Right. Yeah.
And it's also giving you reference points to information on the web which are attested to. Cool. Lovely if you're doing shopping. One of my favorite examples I use is buying a tennis racket and asking it to be presented at a table. And it comes back with those rackets and it comes back with the price and it gives me places I can buy those.
I've heard that you love presenting data in a table in Copilot.
I do. You're right. I do like it in a table because I can't get that when I use a Google search. I love it's in a table and it's all hyperlinked through. The other day, we had a bottle of wine that was given to me and we didn't know what its context was. And you may be aware of an app called Vivino out there, which was pretty good until I tried it on this particular bottle of wine. I couldn't find it. So I just took my phone, took a photo of the bottle of wine, gave it to Copilot on the web. It found that bottle of wine and gave me a great citation on the description of the wine, the price of the wine. So the Copilot, with the breadth of information it's got that it's finding, is even better than some of these purpose-built wine review apps that are out there. I'm just blown away. So that's the web. The work button now looks at my calendar, my email, my documents in OneDrive, and it can even look at my colleagues' information. So when I make a question, I will often do a query such as summarize. Then I put a little forward slash, and it can bring back a list of files that I've been working with or people I've been working with. So I could summarize a PowerPoint presentation, or let me know what's on the agenda for this particular individual, or find a time in my calendar and this individual's calendar where we're both free. So these sorts of questions that you can ask in a generative sense in the work button are incredibly powerful. Look, I could give other examples, but I'm conscious of time, mate. There's some great examples out there for where organizations, individuals got to summarize how they spent their calendar month. Just asking a question, summarize last month into 5 top categories. You don't even have to give it categories. And give me a percentage and put that in, as you know, in a table, because I love tables, and get that as a table. Incredible time saver for getting that sort of information back to present to management about how you spent your last month.
Yeah. So given that, especially in the work context, there's always, and I'm sure you hear it all the time, what is Copilot going to bring back? If I ask for the salary of Philip Meyer, it's going to, potentially come back, look, Phil's annual salary is $1.5 million. Probably undercutting you a little bit there, but that type of, you'd have those conversations quite a lot. I know I do, about the security and what Copilot has actually got access to. Yes. And we've got this thing in Microsoft 365 called Purview. So how important is either implementing Purview, sensitivity labels and all that sort of stuff? How important is that when we're thinking about, or when organizations are thinking about implementing Copilot, especially initially?
One word: critical. Absolutely foundational that you get into doing Purview, which is all the sensitivity labeling, conditional access to documents and files, grouping of information into what group is able to access what information. So while I was being, a few minutes back referring to that as examples of the drone manufacturer and that legal matter where the information was shared, absolutely, without proper implementation of Purview, you could do exactly the query you just gave. And it has happened. Yeah. It happened at a private school right here in Sydney not so long ago, where they made it available to the staff. They made it available to the teachers. They made Copilot available to the administrative staff and students. So cool. Students are doing all this creative work, producing essays, solving problems. Teachers are creating great curriculum and great things for the kids to do to push them further on their adventure around generative AI. Administrators are getting great insights to the performance of students, the performance of staff by using the Excel, Copilot for Excel, and so on and so forth. Beautiful, great. 2 weeks in, the student asked, give me the salaries of all the teaching staff. And they got it. A simple query like that, because they hadn't done Purview. They hadn't said students could only see student information. And indeed, a student could only see their own information that they've created rather than sharing it and copying it to their colleagues. And similarly, the teaching and the HR. Another really sad example I may have shared with you before, Daniel, is this is a couple of months ago. Construction company put in Copilot. Brilliant, fantastic. They gave it to architects. They gave it to business managers. They gave it to salespeople. They also gave it to some of the construction site managers. Sadly, one of the construction site managers asked, give me a list of all female employees under 35 with their phone numbers.
Yeah. Wow.
And he got it in a table. Sent that table to his mates. Now, fortunately, as you know, one of the elements that comes with inside Microsoft 365 Business Premium and above is data loss prevention. So they were able to detect that personally identifiable information had left the business, and they were able to take remedial action. So, but that's not enough. Great, you got DLP, you've discovered a problem. Let's prevent the problem. Let's use Purview to get that sensitivity labeling, to define confidential documents, to define groups and governance over which groups are able to access fundamentally HR information. It's basically job applications that have come in on PDF with the ladies in question's date of birth and their phone numbers in those applications that is found in a SharePoint site. Look, there are some simple things that you could do if you're getting started on the journey, you know about the SharePoint restriction capability. I heard you talk about it the other day very, very well. That's a nice initial step, but in some respects, it cuts out the benefit of what Copilot can do. You're only able to discover what you knew. I want to discover things I don't know, but I'm allowed to know about. So SharePoint restrictions is a good. It provides that restriction, but it's a bad because you don't get that ability to see the information that you would otherwise be able to see through the power of Copilot to discover and share.
Now, you touched on licensing. I don't like delving too much into licensing, but from a licensing perspective and purview, I mean, what's included in, let's say, Business Premium, for example, and what licensing levels should organisations be looking at?
Look, I think they have a choice. Customers absolutely have a choice. So if they're looking at using third-party XDR products, antivirus, anti-spam, if they're looking at using third-party mail, BEC protection products, fine. If they're looking at using third-party governance products or even third-party DLP products, then all they really need is the entry-level versions of Office, basic and standard.
Yeah.
And they can even use Copilot on that. But again, because Copilot is looking for the Microsoft implementations of classification, governance, leveraging BEC, etc., the Enter ID type model, you're not going to get all that coolness that you get with Business Premium. So what's in Business Premium? Which I would argue is your entry point for any business of any size where you've got people who aren't working in the same office space. So if you're 2 or 3 employees and you're always in the same office space, maybe not. But if you're going to work remotely, you're getting Teams. Cool. So now I can make phone calls and I can integrate conversations and I can record those meetings. Great. So I've got Teams. You also get things like bookings so that people can make bookings with you. Maybe I shouldn't go through all the list, Daniel, because it's a very, very, very long list.
It is a long one. Yeah.
In terms of the step up from basic and standard to premium. But for that $10, which is really that step up, you're getting over $50 worth of value compared to putting other products in there, like the OneDrive, the space that comes with OneDrive. But the big piece that you get is the security, compliance, governance, and privacy technologies, which are the same, in many respects, the same capabilities that even at the high end of town, the big banks, the big government departments have got from us in their enterprise SKUs, we give, because security is for everybody. Security at that same level of capability is included to establish those guardrails between departments, to ensure that documents are classified as highly confidential, that we can protect information so that people can't snip screens and paste those into personal drives or send them as a photo to somebody as an attachment. That we can do conditional access so that when I'm traveling, that it pops up with a multi-factor authentication to verify that I'm the right person, detecting things like impossible travelers. 1 minute I'm in Sydney, the next minute I'm London. How can that be? That gives you Azure Azure Virtual Desktop as well. So I can have a virtual desktop experience as well. I get Windows 11. So I get the latest version of Windows, which is a protected, secure operating system running on the appropriate device. I better stop, mate, because I know there is a lot in Business Premium. And for, as I say,
there is
fundamentally a cheap cup of coffee every week as the increase in price. I look to partners to help the customers to implement all that coolness, capability, security, safety, creativity that comes in the box.
Look, especially when we're talking about Copilot, I mean, security is front of mind for most when they're looking at Copilot. So that Business Premium really is that, if you are looking at a Copilot specifically, then Business Premium definitely does provide sort of those capabilities that we talk about there. Now, you talk to a lot of partners, but customers as well. I think I recall you mentioning that you've been asked to speak with Apple or in front of Apple and lots of other sort of large organizations. Now, they're probably not implementing Copilot, but the companies that you have seen implement Copilot, what does success, in your view, what does a successful Copilot implementation actually look like? Or is it different? Do you think it's different from organization to organization?
It's definitely different from organization to organization. And I think that in some respects, It's not a product issue. It's about the approach that they have taken in partnership with their partner for that implementation. A key component to consider in this is readiness, training, skilling, showing people how to use Copilot. It's not your standard sort of search. You've got to think about the question that you're not asking. I'll use a simple old adage, dumb question, dumb answer. Smart question, smart answer. So you do need to be thoughtful about how you put these prompts. And I've seen some very elegant prompts in my time, which aren't just 10 words, but they're up to 50 words that people are putting in to get the answer back very clearly in a repeatable way about tasks they need undertaken. So that training and readiness, and then leading into adoption, right? So now we've got a couple of smart people who know how to ask the right questions. How do we now spread that through the business? Please, if I would say one thing, be measured in the way in which you do Copilot. Don't buy it for everybody like that private school or the construction company. Get it with a few people, get them ready, get them taught, teach them how to adopt it, get the benefits. Let's measure those benefits. We've even got a tool called Copilot Dashboard to help you start to measure stuff like that. Once you get that, roll it through. Look, there's many, many different approaches, as you know, Daniel, about how to do this. It could be lunch and learn, brown bag sessions, formal training classes. We run internal competitions in Microsoft to see how we're progressing. We've got one at the moment called Campfire, where it pops up each morning in our Viva environment, Viva Engage environment. We've got to, race to fill out the answers using Copilot to fill in the boxes, which is pretty cool. We win little jackets and badges to in and around that as a competitive spirit that does tend to run our organisation, within our organisation. But and then the measuring of all that, as I mentioned, there's the Copilot dashboard. I guess in fundamental, it is about the security element that I've already spoken about with Purview as foundational. But secondly, if I summarise what I've just said into breaking habits, people will go back to the way they've done it in the past. They'll go back to doing their PowerPoint the way they did it in the past. They'll go back to writing the Word document from scratch. They'll go back to solving Excel spreadsheets and going through thousands and thousands of rows and looking for it with their eyes, instead of trusting the machine. Make that leap of faith, ask the question, see what you get back. It may not be 100%, but I tell you what, it's going to be in the 80s, and that's a big saving in time.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, when I'm talking to customers or presenting or whatever, I'm talking about the bell curve. So you implement Copilot, it gets a really big spike up in adoption at the very beginning, and then people are like, is that all it does? And there's no sort of ongoing type of engagement there. And personally, I think it's important, and you probably see this as well, but it's very specific for different scenarios. So the way that you use Copilot is going to be different to myself or a developer or somebody like that. A dev's might be in Copilot for GitHub, or a salesperson in Copilot or Sales Copilot. So understanding the use cases for specific groups of people in an organization, I think also, has the impact of a successful implementation too.
And I like the way you've brought in there into the conversation a couple of the other Copilots. One of the corny jokes I use when I talk about Copilot, it's more Copilots at Microsoft now than there is at Qantas. I know, I'm a dad. I'm a granddad. I can use corny jokes like that. But there are a lot, and they are built for the persona. If you spend some time learning about large language models and the grounding and toning and safety and the meta prompting in and around the way in which large language models work, like ChatGPT, you do want to prime them with the context of how it should respond. So the Copilot for sales is primed in and around, it's a salesperson who's going to be asking questions here. In service, it's a service person, it's a frontline service, it's a call center service person who's looking for answers to questions in this one. You reference GitHub Copilot. So in that context, it's a developer. So a developer here is going to be asking questions to optimize their code, to generate code fragments which connect with different things. So you wouldn't use a generic like Microsoft 365 Copilot, which creates PowerPoint presentations, to go and create complicated code using VS Code, connecting to databases, SAP and Oracle. So each of these Copilots is purposely trained on their aircraft, to use an analogy. They're trained on their particular scenarios to give the best answers in the context of how they've been built. And as there's many other Copilots, but if I may, one of the ones that I love is Copilot Studio,
But
which is the one that lets you as a customer or a partner go and create. And I've seen some absolutely amazing things in the last few months. And remembering Copilot Studio has only been out for 5 months.
yeah,
But I've seen some breathtaking pieces of work done where people have created their own Copilots, whether they're leveraging the data that sits inside their Microsoft 365 estate, or moreover, connecting into existing systems, training it to then respond, whether it's a recruitment company. I was talking to a bunch of recruitment companies last night, and one of them had already done that. I was talking to legal companies recently. They had used it to tailor it to the legal context, so that when lawyers were asking questions and looking at matters and items open and cases, it was in that context of a lawyer and getting accurate information back. Just amazing what Copilot Studio particularly is really opening my mind to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where the big value add is going to be around connecting those third party systems. There's already a bunch of connectors there out of the box.
1,200.
1,200 and counting, and then you've got your specialized line of business apps as well. What about you personally? You have to be using it personally. What Copilot experience, or what Copilot is helping you the most at the moment?
Oh, look, it's actually at a very simple level. Just using copilot.microsoft.com, using the web button even, to answer questions I get from the community that I engage with on a daily basis. So part of the habit I'm trying to have, the people I talk to as my constituent customers, as it were, is to get them to learn to go to copilot.microsoft.com. Simple questions about, how do I license this? Where is training on that? How does Entra work with this particular interface? How do I create a virtual machine in Azure that's got these particular resources? So technical questions, licensing questions, sales and pricing oriented questions, policy information. I am absolutely loving it, because prior, I would be one of those people, again, using a Google search or a Bing search, trying to find and tracking through a whole bunch of links. So Copilot, if I ask the right question, is giving me that right away. And if it's not quite right, I can just ask it a little bit more clarifying information. It refines it, and there's the citations. There's the links to learn.microsoft.com, or a licensing brief that talks about a topic, etc. So that's probably the most profound to me. Secondly, if I had an option for providing a second option, it would probably, you probably think I'm going to say Teams and recaps. It's not. Do a lot of PowerPoint. So sitting in PowerPoint with Copilot and getting it to create a new PowerPoint for me based on other presentations, giving it some words about, right, so I've presented on this before, and here's a presentation on that before. Now take the slides relevant to this area that I'm going to focus on, and creating a whole new presentation with this as a template. That would have taken me hours. Now, admittedly, it's not blinding seconds later. It takes a bit of while to go for the presentations, get the right slides and put them into the new template for me. We're talking minutes, but it's not hours to go and do that sort of work.
But I think that's what, it's a big thing that people need to understand as well. It's not, not at the moment, it's not going to be 100% production ready, right? So whether you're creating a presentation or a proposal, or even writing code for that matter, you do still need to do a little bit of manual work. But the prep work or the pre-work is just a significant amount of time saving that people will get, definitely.
And if I give that in a personal context, and you could say, well, it's personal, you feel that's not relevant to me. I get that. Pretty glib to say it's me personally. Well, I'm getting 10 hours back a week. 10 hours.
10 hours a week.
The numbers are saying 10 hours a month for people who use this stuff, which is pretty impressive in itself. I'm getting 10 hours a week, a day back a week. We were talking before we started that, today is my learning day. And I'm able to do that without any pressures about stuff to get ready, because it's all ready for next week. I've used that Copilot in PowerPoint to get my content ready for next week for the presentations I've got to run. And probably what struck me was when I started to use it more proficiently. I got a knock on the door from my wife, used in the past at like 6 o'clock, come and have dinner. And I would be there till 8 o'clock. Now she knocks on the door and I'm ready to go, because this stuff is just saving me, in, again, personal context, about 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I mean, it's just you personally having an understanding of how I'm assuming you've, I'll say worked pretty hard at just making or changing habits over a period of time. And I think that's what, the mindset change of people, trying to think about you mentioned earlier on, not going back to old ways of working as such, but, just stopping and thinking, let's see how we can improve this process, and then just making it habitual, I think makes a big difference.
Well, it's simple things like not having, Bing, because I'm a Microsoft guy, as my homepage. Yeah. Right, having copilot.microsoft.com as my homepage.
Yeah.
Actually removing Google and Bing from my favorites bar and Edge, and pushing it down into another's tab. So it's not in my face as an option to use. And catching myself occasionally when I go and go up to the taskbar, because naturally the taskbar, if you put words, it does a Bing search or a Google search, depending on your default. Stopping myself and going, hang on, I got a nice little button there. It's all colourful ribbon. Good. Click that, Phil. Type it in.
Yeah. Interesting. So how long, and how are you finding that? So are you finding Copilot, like how often do you go to Google to do a search?
Well, I haven't been there ever in months now.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And even Bing, I think by accident, I went there a couple of days ago because I knew that in my Bing history had been a particular website that was a few words long and a long URL. I typed in a few of the words and at least Bing came up and I clicked it and I found it. So that's kind of cool that, and even you can do that in Google remembers your past searches. You can put in a few letters and it remembers a URL. Yeah. But that's something I'm used to typing and getting to that particular. I probably should put that site because I refer to it a lot. It's about support for partners, comparing support options for partners. Yeah. And it's a regular one I go to. And because I go to it so often, I probably should have it in a folder of favorites,
Yeah. Right, very good. It's been a fascinating conversation. Now, before we wrap things up, where is the best place, one, for people to stay in contact with you and follow you and just keep updated with what you're doing, but then also just for general information about what's happening in the Copilot space?
Look, I think a good place to go would be to understand everything that's going on as a partner is cloudpartners.transform.microsoft.com. You'd be familiar with that very long URL. Yeah. I remember it because it is such a foundational URL for our partners to get used to. I'm assuming that most of the people listening to this are partners out there. So if you're a customer, you won't be able to get to that. It's a secure site made specifically for our partners. Okay, so if you're a customer, I'd probably be starting with adoption.microsoft.com as a starting point, and also microsoft.com/worklab, which is giving you all that history and background about the whys of Copilot and the experiences others have had with Copilot. So cloudpartners.transform.microsoft.com for our partner community. And in that, there's a whole bunch of presentations and guides and training links and events you can attend. For any customers online, adoption.microsoft.com and microsoft.com/worklab are great places to get your journey started. Or just go to copilot.microsoft.com and ask a question and get some experience in learning yourself. And don't forget to put at the end, if you're comparing things, in a table. Phil's favorite thing is in a table.
And put it on your phone.
So sharply.
Yeah. And put it on your phone as well. It's very valuable on your phone.
And when you do put it on your phone, you will notice that there's kind of the one where you've got your personal email address, your Outlook, your Live, your Hotmail, if you're that old like I am in your personal life. But if you choose your work one, then you will see that double button. You'll see the work and the web button in the Copilot app for your iPhone, your Android, your iPad, etc.
Very good, mate. Appreciate your time. Great chat, great conversation, and I will let you go. But thanks for taking time to have a chat.
Pleasure. Really good to see you. And thanks for the great work you did last week and continue to do, talking about and helping, pardon me, the overall community in and around Microsoft. Thank you, Daniel.
No worries. Thanks, Matt.